"She's wearing my ring," I whispered, my throat raw as I stared across the red carpet at Celeste, the nurse who signed my death certificate, clutching Richard's arm like she owned my life. Cameras flashed like fire around them. Her scream tore through the gala when our eyes met, but behind me, Richard's voice stayed smooth, pretending he didn't know I was alive. He'd stolen my inheritance, my home, even my identity, and now they were flaunting it. But patience was my weapon. Daddy taught me to keep every receipt. I'd survived the flames once. This time, I'd rise and burn their lies down without lifting a match. What they don't know is, I'm here to take everything back. My name is Alicia Caldwell, and I'm 45 years old. After rebuilding my life from nothing, I thought finding Richard was my reward. A safe harbor after years of storms. Our estate, Maple Crest, became everything I dreamed. Of cedar-scented halls after summer rain, marble floors that carried Sunday jazz from room to room, and magnolias bowing at dusk in our gardens. But something shifted when Daddy left me the $15 million. Richard kept pushing for joint investments, yet dodged every request to see the statements. What he didn't know was that I'd kept meticulous records of every document, every signature, old habits from my accounting days. Real strength, Daddy told me before he passed, comes from patience, not force. I felt something dangerous coiling beneath our perfect life, like gas before a spark. Love's ledger always demands balance. I chose comfort over questions, defending the soft places in my life. But let me start from the beginning. It took me a year to return to Atlanta, not because I was afraid. No, I needed time to heal, to think, to plan. I rented a furnished apartment in Buckhead, under my maiden name, Alicia Patterson. The leasing agent didn't even blink when I handed over 6 months' rent in cash. Funny how money smooths over questions that might otherwise arise about a woman with subtle burn scars and minimal paperwork. You ever notice how a place can feel different when you're supposed to be dead? Atlanta was still Atlanta, but now I moved through it like a ghost, watching my old life from the shadows. Every morning. Before sunrise, I'd drive past Maple Crest. The dawn light would catch on the charred portico, making the blackened columns look like they were still burning. Insurance company placards fluttered from boarded windows, marking the property like crime scene tape. I'd park my rental car, nothing flashy, just a white Honda that blended in with morning traffic, and sip gas station coffee while watching the property. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of workers going in and out, carrying clipboards and wearing hard hats. They were probably assessing the damage, deciding if anything could be salvaged. The sight of strangers walking through my home made my stomach twist, but I kept my face neutral. You never know who might be watching. During the day, I buried myself in research. The downtown courthouse became my second home. I'd spend hours combing through public records, my fingers turning dusty, from old files. Every mention of Richard's holding company, every insurance claim, every property transfer, I copied it all. The clerks probably thought I was just another paralegal doing due diligence. That's where I found the first real crack in Richard's story. The death certificate, my death certificate, listed a witness I'd never had. A nurse named Celeste Morgan had signed off on my time of death. But here's the thing. I never had a nurse in those final days at Maple Crest. Not one. My heart started pounding so hard I had to sit down, right there in the records room. Remember how I mentioned keeping receipts? Well, I started a new collection. A thick manila folder labeled Maple Crest Receipts became my Bible. Every document, every discrepancy, every suspicious timing, it all went in there. I color-coded sticky notes by category, red for financial transactions, blue for legal, filings, yellow for witnesses. The organizational system helped keep me focused when memories threatened to overwhelm me. On a chilly Tuesday evening, I parked across from the High Museum. The annual Autumn Arts Gala was in full swing, and I knew Richard wouldn't miss it. He never could resist a chance to network with Atlanta's elite. I sat in my car, breath fogging the window as I watched the parade of luxury vehicles roll up to the valet stand. Then I saw it, our Bentley. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went pale. The valet opened the passenger door and a leg appeared, wrapped in designer silk. Then she emerged, and my whole body went rigid. Celeste. The nurse from my death certificate was wearing a black evening gown that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. But what caught my eye, what made my blood turn to ice, was the ring on her left hand. My ring. The 3-carat emerald-cut diamond that had been in Richard's family for generations, the one his grandmother had given him specifically for me. The dossier in my passenger seat suddenly felt heavy, like it was pulling me down into my seat. I watched her glide up the museum steps, my ring catching the light with every movement of her hand. She looked so comfortable, so at home in my life, like she'd been rehearsing for this role long before I died. I touched my own left hand, where the ring's phantom weight still lingered sometimes. The manila folder crinkled under my grip as I watched Celeste disappear into the museum, wearing my ring, living my life, playing nurse to a patient who hadn't died after all. I couldn't just sit in my car all night. Moving like a shadow, I found a spot near the museum's side entrance where the lighting was dim, but the view was perfect. You know, that feeling when you're watching a train wreck in slow motion? That's what it felt like seeing Richard guide Celeste toward the red carpet, his hand possessive on her lower back, just like he used to do with me. The paparazzi lights exploded around them, and for a second, I was back at Maple Crest, flames licking up the walls. Funny how camera flashes can mirror fire, isn't it? Richard was working the crowd like always, that practiced smile that made everyone feel special. Celeste played her part too, all graceful waves and rehearsed laughs. I let the crowd shift and flow around me until there was just enough space between bodies for her to see me. The timing had to be perfect, and it was. A camera flash caught my face just as Celeste turned her head, highlighting the subtle burn scars I hadn't bothered to conceal. Our eyes met across the crowd. You ever seen someone's face drain of color in real time? First her eyes went wide, then her mouth dropped open, and then came the scream. It wasn't just any scream, it was the kind that makes crystal glasses vibrate. The kind that says you've seen something that can't possibly exist. I could have stayed, could have caused a scene right there. But Daddy always said patience was power. So I just smiled, turned my back, and walked away, while security guards rushed toward her hysteria. Behind me, I heard Richard's voice asking what was wrong, all concern and confusion. Amateur theater at its finest. Back in my apartment, I spent the night crafting emails. Each one was a carefully aimed arrow, loaded with just enough detail to make investigators hungry for more. I listed suspicious insurance valuations that somehow doubled Maple Crest's worth 6 months before the fire. Included dates of mysterious gas line repairs that no legitimate company had recorded. Even threw in some questions about why the newly renovated East Wing, the one that burned hottest, was insured for triple its actual value. Every email got policy numbers, contractor names, dates that could be verified. The kind of breadcrumbs that make investigators salivate. I scheduled them all to hit newsrooms at dawn, right when the morning editors would be looking for fresh stories. Sleep didn't come easy that night, how could it? But when I woke up, my phone was already buzzing with notifications. Police reopen Maple Crest fire investigation. Questions arise about millionaire widow's death. Anonymous source suggests foul play in mansion fire. The reporters started calling within hours. They wanted interviews with their anonymous source, promising confidentiality, exclusive access, the works. I ignored every request. The minute I stepped into the spotlight, I'd lose my advantage. Better to let Richard and Celeste sweat, wondering who was pulling strings behind the scenes. By afternoon, I knew it was time to visit Daddy's old law firm. The leather folder felt heavy in my hands as I walked through those familiar marble halls. How many times had I come here as a little girl, watching my father command respect in his 3-piece suits? Now I was back, wearing my own armor of a tailored blazer, and facts that could burn everything down. Legally, this time. The conference room door looked exactly the same, all heavy oak and brass fittings. But when I pushed it open, I found Marcus Wheeler, Daddy's former partner, sitting alone at the massive table. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely hold his water glass. One look at my face and he knew. The ghost had come home to haunt them all. "I've been expecting you," he whispered, voice trembling worse than his hands. "There are things about that night. About Richard." I sat down across from Marcus, letting the heavy silence stretch between us. That old brass wall clock behind his head kept ticking, each sound like a timer counting down to detonation. Remember those corporate meetings where every second feels like an hour? This was worse. My leather folder made a soft thump as I laid it on the mahogany table. Marcus flinched, actually flinched, at the sound. I'd known this man since I was knee-high to a grasshopper, used to bring him Christmas cookies every year. Now, he couldn't even look me in the eye. "Let's start with something simple," I said, keeping my voice steady as I pulled out the first document. The paper whispered against the wood as I slid it across. "This is my signature from last year's tax return, and this..." Another document joined the first. "This is supposedly my signature on the cremation authorization. Notice anything interesting?" His Adam's apple bobbed as he glanced between the papers. The ticking seemed to get louder. "About that nurse who witnessed my death certificate," I continued, tapping the second page. "Funny thing, I don't remember having a nurse. Then again, I don't remember dying either." Marcus's hands were trembling so bad he had to clasp them together. The afternoon sun through the window caught his wedding ring, making it flash like a distress signal. I can explain," he stammered. "Please do." I leaned back, crossing my legs at the ankle. "Start with the dates." The cremation order was signed 3 days before the fire. Want to tell me how that's possible? You know that moment when someone's face just crumples? When their whole carefully constructed world starts falling apart? That's what happened to Marcus right there. "Richard came to me first," he whispered, words tumbling out like they'd been waiting years to escape. "Said he needed help with some paperwork, insurance stuff. I didn't know, I swear I didn't know about the fire until after. But then, he had everything planned, the gas line failure, the timing, all of it. He filed the insurance claim papers before the flames were even out." Marcus wiped his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. "That woman he's with now? Celeste? She posed as a nurse at the crematorium, signed off on identifying a body that wasn't even you." My stomach clenched like I'd swallowed broken glass. All those years of trust, of building a life together, and Richard had planned my death like it was just another business transaction. "Why didn't you come forward?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "He threatened my family." Marcus's voice cracked. "But I'll sign an affidavit now. Tell everything I know. I need protection. For my wife, my kids." I nodded slowly, mind racing. A sworn confession would be explosive, but without more, it was just one man's word against Richard's army of lawyers. I needed something concrete, something undeniable. "The inheritance," I said suddenly. "How much did Richard actually get access to?" Marcus blinked, thrown by the change in direction. Only partial amounts. There's still a significant portion frozen." I leaned forward, pulse quickening. "Why frozen?" "Your father's trust had safeguards. Certain assets can only be released with..." He swallowed hard. "With your living fingerprint." The legs of my chair scraped against the floor as I pushed back. "My living fingerprint?" Marcus nodded. "Biometric verification. Richard's been trying to get around it for months, but the trust administrators won't budge. They need your actual living fingerprint to release the remaining funds." The clock kept ticking, but now each sound felt like opportunity instead of threat. Richard might have stolen my life, my home, even my identity. But he couldn't fake one simple thing, the proof that I was still very much alive. Thunder cracked outside Marcus's office window, making us both jump. Atlanta storms had always had perfect timing, like nature itself was punctuating revelations. The rain started pelting against the glass, a steady drumbeat to match my racing thoughts. "How long?" I asked, already dreading the answer. "How long until the transfer becomes automatic?" Marcus pulled up the probate calendar on his computer, hands still shaky on the mouse. 48 hours from... He checked his watch. "From right now, actually. There's a final hearing scheduled. Just a formality, really. After that, the remaining funds transfer directly to Richard's holding company. You ever have one of those moments where time seems to slow down and speed up all at once? That's what it felt like sitting there, watching the rain streak down the window while my inheritance, my father's legacy, ticked away like a bomb about to go off. I pulled out my notebook, the same one I'd been using to track Richard's movements since I got back to Atlanta. At the top of a fresh page, I wrote in clear, steady letters, T48, appear publicly, verify identity, halt transfer. "Tell me about this hearing," I said, pen poised. "Who'll be there? Security arrangements?" "It's actually being live streamed," Marcus replied, color returning to his face as we moved into practical territory. "Part of the court's new transparency initiative. Richard's lawyers pushed for it, probably wanted to show how above board everything is." A smile tugged at my lips. Richard always did have a flair for the theatrical. Well, two could play at that game. "Here's what we're going to do," I said, sketching out a quick timeline. "I need copies of everything, the contractor lists, those suspicious invoices for the wing that burned, and we'll need your affidavit tonight. How fast can you get it notarized?" Marcus glanced at his phone. "My regular notary's still in the office. I can have it done within the hour." "Good." I tapped my pen against the page. "We'll need a burner phone, too, something that can't be traced back to either of us. I'll handle the media tips myself." For the next few hours, we worked like we were prepping for the biggest corporate merger of our lives. Every document had to be perfect, every timeline verified, every potential question anticipated. The rain kept falling outside, but inside Marcus's office, the air crackled with purpose. Around midnight, I finally headed back to my apartment, portfolio bulging with ammunition. I barely slept, running through my plan again and again. You know how they say revenge is a dish best served cold? They never mention how much prep work goes into the cooking. Morning came with a growl of thunder that matched my mood. I stood at my kitchen counter, letting the bitter smell of black coffee ground me in the moment. My hands were steady as I smoothed my blazer, the same one I used to wear to board meetings, now holding a different kind of power play. "Your widow sends her regards," I practiced in the mirror, testing different inflections until it felt right. Not angry, not bitter, just calm and clear as a bell. The courthouse lobby was already buzzing when I arrived. Cameras whirred to life as I passed through security, reporters whispering into microphones. Nobody recognized me yet. Why would they? The woman they thought they knew had died in a fire last year. I could feel the weight of Marcus's affidavit in my portfolio, along with every other piece of evidence we'd gathered. Through the heavy wooden doors, I could hear Richard's lawyer droning on about procedural details. My heart wasn't racing anymore. Instead, there was a strange sense of calm. Like my daddy used to say, "Truth don't need no rehearsal." The doors opened silently. Thank God for well-oiled hinges. I stepped into the hearing room just as Richard turned to whisper something to his attorney. Our eyes met across the room, and I watched his face go from annoyed to confused to ghost white in the space of a heartbeat. I took one deep breath, feeling the weight of every camera, every gaze, every second of the past year leading to this moment. Then I spoke, my voice carrying clear and strong through the sudden silence. "Your widow sends her regards." You ever notice how time gets strange in courtrooms? 1 second stretches like taffy, then 10 minutes vanish in a blink. That's how it felt as my words hung in the air. "Your widow sends her regards," while chaos erupted around me. Bailiffs pushed through the crowd like salmon swimming upstream, their radios crackling. Reporters thrust microphones forward like they were trying to spear fish, shouting questions that blurred together into white noise. But I kept my eyes locked on Richard, watching the color drain from his face before that familiar mask of control slammed back into place. His attorney, Thompson, I think his name was, leaned in close, whispering urgently. Richard's jaw tightened the way it always did when things weren't going his way. You spend 15 years married to someone. You learn to read their tells. Your Honor, Thompson called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. We request an immediate recess to address this unexpected development. But Marcus was already moving, legal papers flying from his briefcase like autumn leaves. Emergency petition to stay the transfer, Your Honor, he announced, waving the documents. The original beneficiary is very much alive, as you can see. I have a sworn affidavit detailing the circumstances. Judge Carter's gavel cracked like lightning. Order! Everyone sit down. She adjusted her glasses, scanning the petition Marcus had handed up. These are serious allegations, counselors. Very serious indeed. My heart was doing double time, but I kept my spine straight. Daddy always said posture was power, especially when you're scared. The judge looked up, her eyes sharp. We'll need immediate forensic confirmation. Fingerprints, DNA sampling, and I want all prior medical records on my desk by this evening. Without concrete proof of identity, this petition isn't worth the paper it's printed on. I felt my stomach drop, but nodded. I can head to Atlanta General right now, Your Honor. The rural clinic that treated my burns forwarded their charts there. Do it, she ordered. Mr. Peterson, she addressed. Marcus, you're responsible for collecting any additional supporting documentation, birth certificate, historical medical records, anything that can verify identity. Marcus was already on his phone, probably emailing my childhood immunization records from his archive. Meanwhile, I let the courthouse tech ink my fingertips, trying not to flinch as the camera flash caught every scar on my face. One wrong match, and everything would crumble. The AA. Next few hours were a blur of fluorescent lights and antiseptic halls. I must have checked my phone 100 times, waiting for news while technicians ran their tests. Every beep of an incoming message made my pulse jump. Then a young clerk found me, his expression making my blood run cold before he even opened his mouth. Ms. Caldwell? Richard's attorneys just filed a counter-motion. They're claiming identity fraud. What? The word came out sharp enough to make him step back. They're saying you're an imposter who obtained surgical alterations to mimic the deceased Mrs. Caldwell. The judge has scheduled a night session to hear both sides. I leaned against the wall, feeling the cool plaster against my palm. Of course Richard would try this angle. It was exactly the kind of twist he'd use to buy time. But time for what? The clerk shifted nervously. There's more. They're demanding extensive physical examination to prove the burn scars are genuine trauma and not cosmetic work. For a moment, I was back in that rural clinic, bandages being changed, pain so deep it felt like my bones were on fire. The memory made my jaw clench. Fine, let them look. These scars tell the truth, even if Richard won't. I checked my watch. 4 hours until the night session. 4 hours to prove I wasn't a ghost, wasn't an imposter, wasn't crazy. Just a woman who survived and came back to claim what was hers. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I pulled out my phone to call Marcus. We had work to do. The courthouse felt different at night. Halogens cast harsh shadows across marble floors that had gleamed so warmly that morning. My heels clicked like metronomes as I carried our authenticated documents toward courtroom C. Know what's funny? I used to love the way these old buildings smelled after hours, like furniture polish and history. Now it just reminded me of funeral homes. Marcus met me at the door, his tie loosened but his eyes sharp. Ready? I nodded, though my throat felt tight. We'd spent the afternoon collecting evidence, verified medical records, DNA preliminary results, even a video deposition from Dr. Chen at the burn clinic. But Richard had resources too, and I knew better than to underestimate him. The bailiff called us to order, and I settled into the hard wooden chair, watching Richard's performance begin. He'd changed into a charcoal suit that made him look appropriately grieving, his shoulders curved with practiced sorrow. Thompson, his lawyer, started laying out their position with the smooth confidence of someone billing 4 figures per hour. Your Honor, while we sympathize with this individual's claims, the fact remains that burn injuries this severe make traditional identification nearly impossible. The real Alicia Caldwell died tragically in that fire. This unfortunate attempt to exploit that tragedy— Objection, Marcus cut in. Counsel is editorializing. The judge nodded. Stick to facts, Mr. Thompson. But Richard was already rising, playing his part perfectly. Your Honor, if I may? His voice caught just enough to suggest emotion held in check. I buried my wife. I mourned her. Now this grifter appears, using our pain to— He shook his head, a masterclass in controlled grief. I kept my face neutral, though my nails were cutting into my palms. You want to talk about pain, Richard? We presented Dr. Chen's video testimony next. The clinic physician detailed my injuries, treatment timeline, and identifying marks that matched my medical history. But Richard's team had their own experts, suggesting sophisticated surgical techniques could replicate burn patterns. By 11:30, the judge looked drained. The identification evidence is compelling, but inconclusive without context. I need to see documentation of intent, emails, phone records, anything showing premeditation of the alleged fraud. Until then, I'm withholding judgment. We'll reconvene tomorrow at 2. The night air hit me like a slap as I left the courthouse. My hopes had dimmed to a pilot light, flickering but refusing to die. Marcus touched my shoulder. We'll figure something out. Get some rest. I was halfway to my car when my phone buzzed. Blocked number. I answered, but they hung up. It happened again 30 seconds later. Then a text. We need to talk. Alone. I stared at those words until my screen went dark. Another text followed with an address, Revel Coffee Shop, and a time, 5:30 a.m. Sleep. Wasn't happening anyway, so I arrived as their lights came on. The place smelled of fresh grounds and lemon cleaner, empty except for a woman in the corner. Even with oversized sunglasses hiding half her face, I recognized Celeste. She didn't look up as I slid into the booth. You're early. So are you. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped her cup. I'll make this quick. I want immunity. From what? Don't play dumb. It doesn't suit. You. She glanced around, though we were still alone. I'll cooperate. Tell them everything. But I need protection first. I studied her, looking for the trap. Why now? Because Richard's losing it. She stopped, swallowed. Let's just say I'm not feeling very secure anymore. And I should trust you because— She reached into her bag and pulled out a small drive labeled Ashes. Real subtle, Richard. Everything's here. Emails planning, the fire, insurance paperwork, bank transfers, all of it. I didn't reach for it. Why didn't you come forward before? Would you have believed me? Her laugh was bitter. Besides, I was compromised. But now— She pushed the drive closer. Now I'm choosing survival. I picked up the drive, feeling its weight, literal and metaphorical. If this is a trap, it's not. She stood, adjusting those ridiculous sunglasses. Check your email in an hour. I'm sending copies to prove it's real. She paused. For what it's worth? I'm sorry. I watched her hurry out, then opened my laptop there in the coffee shop. The folder labeled Ashes contained hundreds of emails. The first one I opened made my coffee go cold. Gas line inspection tomorrow. Everything's set. After this, she'll never question where her money went. I was still reading when the sun came up. I spent the next 4 hours with Marcus in his office, hunched over laptops while we authenticated every digital breadcrumb in those emails. The room smelled of stale coffee and printer toner, but I barely noticed. We were finally getting somewhere. Look at this header, Marcus said, tapping his screen. IP address matches Richard's office network. Timestamp aligns perfectly with the contractor's work order for that routine gas line inspection. His fingers flew across the keyboard. And here, Same day he filed the enhanced coverage rider on the West Wing. The wing that just happened to burn the hottest. I rubbed my temples, fighting a headache. You think you know someone? Then you find their insurance fraud handbook. Marcus printed another batch of emails, adding them to our growing pile of evidence. We should get this to the DA's office before Richard's people can spin it? I finished, already, reaching for my coat. Way ahead of you. The liaison's office was 3 blocks away, and Atlanta's humidity made every step feel like wading through soup. Detective Morris was waiting for us, reading glasses perched on his nose as we walked him through the timeline. Make sure Celeste's statement gets time-stamped and sealed, I insisted. Richard has a way of making evidence disappear. Morris nodded, his pen scratching across his notepad. We'll handle it by the book. This is solid work. Should be enough for... My phone buzzed. Then Marcus's. We shared a look as we both reached for our devices. No, I whispered, scanning the notification. No. Richard had somehow gotten wind of our moves. While we'd been building our case, he'd filed an emergency petition with Atlantic Trust Bank to accelerate the transfer of my frozen assets. His reason? Urgent market risk requiring immediate reallocation. Marcus swore under his breath. He's using the Maxwell clause, the one about protecting asset value during volatile markets. But the stay only covers probate court actions. Marcus was already packing up. The side letter with the bank is technically separate. We need to file another emergency motion to extend the stay's scope. I checked my watch. How long? 2 hours, tops, before the bank processes it. Maybe less. The sky had turned an angry green-black by the time we hit the courthouse steps. Thunder rolled overhead like artillery fire as we rushed through security. Again. My heels clicked against marble as we power-walked to the clerk's office. Please, I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice as I handed over our motion. This needs to go to Judge Warren immediately. The clerk glanced at the clock, then at the growing storm outside. She's about to leave for the day. It's an emergency motion, Marcus cut in, using his most authoritative tone. Time sensitive. More thunder. Closer now. The windows rattled in their frames as rain started hammering the glass. The clerk disappeared with our paperwork, leaving us to wait in that peculiar courthouse silence that always feels like holding your breath. 20 minutes later, we were in Judge Warren's chambers. She didn't bother hiding her irritation at the late-day filing. Your Honor, Marcus began, Mr. Thompson is attempting to circumvent your stay order by... I can read, Counselor. She glanced at the motion while rain drummed against her window. The question is whether this court has jurisdiction over a private banking agreement that predates the current proceedings. My chest tightened. I knew that tone. The clerk brought in the freshly printed motion, right as lightning split the sky outside. Judge Warren studied it for what felt like hours, but was probably 30 seconds. Motion denied, she said finally, at least for now. But Your Honor, I started. She held up a hand. Ms. Caldwell, I understand your concern, but I need more than speculation about market clauses to interfere with a standing private contract. Bring me concrete evidence of fraud in the banking documents themselves, and we can revisit this. She closed the file. That's all for today. I stood there, watching 18 months of careful planning start to unravel, all because of one banking clause we'd overlooked. The parking garage felt like a tomb. Rain drummed against concrete, and my wipers carved sad little arcs through the condensation. I'd been sitting here for 20 minutes, watching the water streak down my windshield like tears while the dashboard clock blinked its quiet countdown. 47 hours and 13 minutes left. The number hit me like a physical weight. You know those moments when exhaustion just crashes over you? When you've been running so hard for so long that your bones ache? This was mine. Right there in that dim garage, with only the emergency lights casting weird shadows, I felt every single day of the past 18 months settle onto my shoulders. Maybe the ashes had won. After all, maybe Richard would get away with it, like he got away with everything else. The thought of just letting go whispered through my mind. Walk away from the money, from the fight, from all of it. Start fresh somewhere without the weight of Maple Crest's ghosts. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone. Before I could talk myself out of it, I dialed the number I'd memorized from my medical records. Hello? The voice was warm, professional. This is Nurse Chen. This is Alicia. From the burn unit last year? My voice cracked a little. I don't know if you remember. Of course I remember you. There was a smile in her voice. The patient who wouldn't give up, even when the pain was worst. I closed my eyes, transported back to those endless nights of debridement and dressing changes. I think I'm giving up now. No. The word was gentle but firm. You didn't survive those burns just to let them win now. You lived to testify, Alicia. Finish this. Something in my chest unknotted. She was right. I hadn't crawled through hell just to quit at the finish line. Thank you, I whispered. After hanging up, I sat straight in my seat and pulled out my laptop. If the courts wouldn't help, I'd try a different court. Public opinion. Richard's whole world was built on reputation and appearances. Time to shatter both. My fingers flew across the keys as I drafted a press release. Former Maple Crest resident to address insurance fraud allegations. Simple, clean, impossible for news desks to ignore. I attached my contact info and blind copied every reporter who'd been sniffing around the case. Then I started on the visual aids. You don't spend 20 years in operations management without learning how to build a timeline that tells a story. I grabbed my emergency presentation kit from the trunk. Foam board, markers, photo prints, and mounting tape. 3 hours later, my hotel room looked like a detective's war room. The timeline stretched across 3 boards. I mounted everything on easels, then added blown-up photos. My wedding ring on Celeste's finger, the burned-out wing, Richard's signature on suspicious documents. The kind of visuals that make great B-roll for evening news. Sleep wasn't happening, so I rehearsed instead. Each email needed the perfect emphasis. Each date had to land like a hammer blow. By sunrise, my voice was hoarse but ready. The courthouse steps were already crowded when I arrived at 6:45 a.m. News vans lined the curb, their satellite dishes reaching up like metal flowers. Tripods clustered around the podium someone had thoughtfully provided. The morning air felt electric with anticipation. I smoothed my jacket and checked my note cards one last time. My timeline board stood ready on their easels, still covered with black cloth. The microphone waited, silent and patient, as reporters tested their equipment and photographers adjusted their angles. My fingers had just brushed the microphone when tires screeched against wet pavement. A black Escalade slammed to a stop at the curb, its doors flying open before it fully settled. You know those moments when everything moves in slow motion, but your mind's racing a mile a minute? That's what it felt like watching Celeste emerge from that SUV. Gone were the designer dresses and society smile. She wore a plain black pantsuit, flanked by 2 stone-faced attorneys who looked like they charged by the breath. Behind them came the real power players, 3 detectives in cheap suits carrying folders stamped with red, urgent labels. The morning. Sun caught their badges as they climbed the courthouse steps. One nodded at me, just slightly. That's when I knew the emails had done their job. The reporters' heads swiveled between us like they were watching center court at Wimbledon. Time to serve. I stepped to the microphone bank, my heels clicking against marble. The sound system whined softly as I adjusted the closest mic. Good morning. I'm Alicia Caldwell, and I'm here to address some questions about Maple Crest. Camera shutters clicked like crickets. I pulled out my phone, already queued to the right email. I'd like to read something sent by Richard Caldwell to his attorney on March 15th last year, 3 days after the fire. I kept my voice steady, let each word land. Quote, "Don't worry about the paperwork. Ashes have a way of clearing things up." End quote. The crowd's intake of breath was audible. One of the detectives stepped forward, badge already out. "Detective Marcus Shaw, Major Crimes. We're executing search warrants at Mr. Caldwell's office and residence as we speak." Right on cue, my phone buzzed. The DA's liaison was speed-walking up the steps, waving a blue-bound document. I'd seen enough court orders to recognize one at 50 paces. He didn't bother with the microphone, just projected, "The district attorney's office has secured an emergency. Administrative freeze on all transfers related to the Maple Crest estate and associated holdings, pending completion of our fraud investigation." The clock in my head, the one that had been counting down those precious 48 hours, finally stopped its merciless ticking. My knees wanted to buckle with relief, but I kept my spine straight. Years of boardroom presentations don't desert you in clutch moments. When we reconvened inside, the hearing room had transformed. 2 large monitors flanked the bench, their cables snaking across the floor like black rivers. The gallery was standing room only, and the court reporter's fingers hovered over her stenotype like a pianist ready for concerto. The judge looked different too, sharper, more focused. Someone had clearly briefed her on what was coming. "Your Honor," my attorney began, "we're prepared to present exhibit package Ashes in Awe, its entirety." "Proceed." The screens flickered to life. Richard's emails marched across them in damning parade, each one dated, authenticated, devastating. I made myself look at Richard. He sat there in his $1,000 suit, that familiar half-smile playing around his mouth. The same expression he'd worn when telling me the investment paperwork was just formalities, darling. He leaned over to whisper something to his lawyer, and that smirk widened just a fraction. My stomach clenched. I'd seen that look before, right before he closed major deals. It meant he thought he had an ace in the hole. A young clerk scurried in from the side door, clutching a sealed envelope like it might explode. She handed it to the judge with a whispered explanation that made His Honor's eyebrows climb. The judge broke the seal with deliberate care, unfolding what looked like official letterhead. Her eyes moved down the page, then back up, then down again. My heart started that countdown rhythm again, but this time to a different clock, one marking the seconds until Richard's final play. The judge cleared her throat. "Counsel, I have here an emergency filing from the defense, a settlement offer accompanied by—" She paused, adjusting her glasses. "An affidavit regarding the origin of the Maple Crest fire." You ever have one of those moments where you can feel the air getting sucked out of a room? This was one of them. Richard's lawyer stood, straightening his tie with theatrical precision. "Your Honor, we have sworn testimony indicating that Ms. Caldwell herself orchestrated the destruction of Maple Crest for insurance proceeds. The very scars she displays as evidence of victimhood are, in fact, self-inflicted wounds meant to support this elaborate fraud." My stomach didn't just drop, it free fell like an elevator with cut cables. Around me, phones chirped like digital locusts as reporters raced to update their stories. I caught a glimpse of one headline: "Maple Crest Mystery, Victim or Mastermind." Remember what I said about boardroom training? It kicked in hard. I rose slowly, kept my voice level. "Your Honor, I request permission to enter rebuttal evidence. The Burns Recovery Center in Savannah has complete medical records of my treatment, including time-stamped oxygen therapy sessions that physically placed me 200 miles from Atlanta when Maple Crest burned." The judge frowned at her clerk. "These records weren't previously submitted?" "We received them this morning, Your Honor," my attorney explained, along with sworn declarations from 3 respiratory therapists who treated Ms. Caldwell. While the judge studied the medical documents, the DA's liaison slipped through the side door. He made a beeline for the bench, paper clutched in his hand like a winning lottery ticket. "Your Honor," his whisper carried in the tense quiet, "the forensics team just completed their preliminary search of Mr. Caldwell's office laptop. They've discovered a detailed fire simulation program with saved files specifically modeling the Maple Crest East Wing." Now that got everyone's attention. The judge motioned him forward. "The simulation timestamps predate the actual fire by 3 weeks," he continued, "and the burn pattern projections—" He spread out several printouts. They're an exact match for the actual damage pattern documented by fire investigators. I watched Richard's face as the liaison spoke. You know how sometimes you'll see a tiny crack appear in a windshield, and you just know it's going to spiderweb across the whole thing? That's what happened to his expression, starting at the corner of his mouth, spreading up toward those cold eyes. Your Honor, my attorney stood. We moved to admit both the medical records and the simulation evidence. Richard's lawyer jumped up. Objection. The laptop evidence was obtained without... Under the warrant signed this morning, the DA's liaison cut in smoothly, which specifically included all electronic devices containing financial and planning, documents related to Maple Crest. The judge didn't even pause. Both the medical records and simulation evidence are admitted. She turned to Richard. Mr. Caldwell, given these developments, I'm ordering you remanded into custody pending... This is absurd! Richard surged to his feet. You can't possibly... Sit down, Mr. Caldwell. But he was past hearing. I built this city's skyline. You think some burned-up ghost can just walk in here and... Bailiffs. They moved fast, those courthouse veterans. Two of them flanked Richard before he could finish his rant, handcuffs catching the fluorescent light. I watched it all like I was seeing it through water. The great Richard Caldwell, who told me I was his reward from heaven, now showing his true face to the world. All that smooth charm cracked wide open, revealing the raw ugliness beneath. My father used to say that patience doesn't just reveal truth, it arms it. As I watched the bailiffs approach Richard, those words felt carved in stone. I needed air. The kind that doesn't taste like victory or defeat, just plain Atlanta autumn air. Stepping out onto the courthouse steps, I watched news vans double park while police sirens Dopplered away into the distance. Above me, news drones buzzed like angry hornets, their camera eyes tracking every movement. You know that moment when you've been holding your breath so long you forgot you were doing it? That's how it felt when my phone buzzed with a text from the bank's compliance officer. Federal regulatory guidance received. All linked accounts frozen pending investigation. I leaned against a marble column, letting my lungs finally fill completely. The financial noose Richard had tried to tighten around my inheritance had just turned into his own collar. Funny how karma works sometimes, isn't it? Ms. Caldwell? A young clerk caught my eye. Judge needs everyone back inside. The courtroom had that strange energy you feel right before a thunderstorm breaks. Celeste sat ramrod straight at the witness table, hands folded like she was at Sunday service. Only the tremor in her voice gave away the stakes as she testified. Yes, I posed as the nurse. Her words carried clear through the hushed room. I signed the crematorium paperwork using the name Sarah Mitchell, RN. Richard said it was the only way to process the insurance claim quickly. And the emails entered into evidence? The DA prompted. All authentic. Richard drafted most of them from his personal laptop. She paused, swallowing hard. He was already planning our wedding before he staged the fire. That's when Richard exploded. You treacherous little... He half rose, pointing at Celeste. I'll bury you. I'll sue every person in this room into poverty. The camera's whirred, catching his meltdown in high definition. Remember what I said about cracks spreading? His whole facade was shattering live on streaming video. Mr. Caldwell, the judge's gavel crack echoed like a gunshot. One more outburst and I'll have you gagged as well as cuffed. Richard's lawyer tried to rein him in, but it was too late. The judge was already writing, her pen scratching like claws across paper. Given the evidence presented, including authenticated emails, forensic financial records, and cooperating witness testimony, this court finds probable cause for immediate arrest. She looked up, steel in her gaze. Bailiffs, take Mr. Caldwell into custody on charges of criminal fraud, forgery, and attempted wrongful transfer of assets. Something shifted in my chest then, like a weight I'd carried so long I'd forgotten it wasn't part of me. My father's voice echoed in my memory, that deep baritone that could shake pictures on walls. Baby girl, sometimes justice walks slow, but it always walks sure. The fluorescent lights seemed to drain the color from Richard's expensive suit as the bailiffs moved in. He looked smaller somehow, less like the titan who'd built half of Atlanta's skyline, more like a street magician whose tricks had finally failed him. I gripped my dossier, that faithful companion through all of this, and watched him being led away. But even as the courtroom drama wound down, I knew I wasn't finished. There was one more scene to play out, one more place I needed to visit. As the sun started its descent, I pointed my car toward Maple Crest, toward those blackened bones that had once been my home, where all this began in fire and betrayal. The driveway stretched out before me, like a dark ribbon against the autumn grass. Behind the police tape and warning signs, the mansion's scorched skeleton reached toward the purple-orange sky, waiting for me to come home one last time. The sun hung low and golden over what remained of Maple Crest, threading light through the surviving trees like nature's own caution tape. Broken glass crunched under my shoes as I made my way up what used to be our circular drive. You ever notice how destruction has its own peculiar beauty? The way those burnt timbers reached up like black fingers against the autumn sky, how the marble steps had cracked but hadn't crumbled? It was almost poetic. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Richard's perp walk was trending. The video showed him shuffling through the precinct doors, designer suit wrinkled, hands cuffed behind his back. Already, the vultures were circling what remained of his empire. 3 major clients had pulled their contracts within hours of his arrest. His holding company's stock was in free fall, and sponsors were scrubbing his name from their donor walls faster than the fire had eaten through our bedroom walls. I couldn't help but remember how he used to stand at charity galas, one hand raised with that $1,000 smile, announcing another $1 million pledge. Now those same organizations were issuing press releases distancing themselves from individuals under investigation for serious financial crimes. Ms. Caldwell? I turned to find the probate clerk picking her way carefully through the debris, manila envelope in hand. Behind her, a small cluster of reporters had gathered at the property line, their cameras trained on us like patient predators. "Everything's prepared," she said, laying out the fingerprint forms on a makeshift table, just a piece of plywood balanced on 2 sawhorses. The contrast almost made me laugh, high finance paperwork being signed on construction scraps. While she set up the ink pad, I pulled a young magnolia sapling from my car. The root ball was heavy in my arms as I walked to the exact spot where my bedroom had been, where I should have died, according to Richard's plans. The ash-streaked concrete still bore the outline of our foundation. You know what's funny about ash? It's incredible fertilizer. What burns can feed what grows next. I knelt down in the sooty remains, my pants getting dirty as I dug the hole. My hands stayed steady, no rage, no trembling, just purpose. A few photographers crept closer, but I didn't mind. Let them capture this. Let them see rebuilding instead of revenge. "Ready for your prints, ma'am," the clerk called out. I stood, brushed off my hands, and pressed each fingertip to the ink pad. One by one, I left my marks on the documents that would release the frozen inheritance funds, not as spoils of war, but as simple restitution. Justice returning what theft had taken. My father's lawyer stood off to the side, watching with quiet satisfaction. He'd weathered threats and pressure to stand by the truth, and I owed him more than money could repay. "Thank you," I told him, "for remembering whose side honor serves." He just nodded, understanding that some debts are best acknowledged simply. The reporters started shouting questions, but I lifted a hand in that universal gesture of enough. Most of them got the message. The few who didn't were silenced by my calm stare. I'd given them their story, let them tell it without my narration. Last thing I did was reach into my pocket for the wedding ring. Evidence had released it. That morning, that circle of gold that had meant everything once. Now it was just metal and memory. I tied it to a length of white ribbon and wrapped it gently around the magnolia's slim trunk. The setting sun caught the ring just right, making it flame like a tiny beacon. But my eyes were already lifted to the horizon, where the future stretched out clean and wide. Everything that mattered was ahead now, not behind in the ashes. I spoke, just loud enough for the closest cameras to catch it, though I wasn't really speaking to them at all. You can't bury what's meant to rise.